Hello everybody, welcome to Art Appreciation. This is our first lecture of the semester. So sometimes we may have a couple of lecture videos to watch. This time we'll only have one. Just a reminder in case you haven't read all of the assignment instructions before we start. You should take notes on this lecture. You're going to submit those for a grade. Make sure that your notes are thorough enough, that you include enough from the lecture that I can tell that you actually watched the lecture and that you watched the entire lecture. My suggestion is to make sure you list every work of art because that tells me you've seen every single slide. Each slide will contain at least one work of art. And so if you list all the works of art and then write about what I talk about for each slide as we get to it, that's usually going to be the best way to go, that I can tell that you actually watched the lecture from your notes. They can be handwritten. You can type them out however you want to do it. If you handwrite them, just make sure that when you turn it in, it's all in one document. So you can do that several ways. You can scan it if you have a scanner, or if you can go somewhere and get it scanned into like a PDF document. You can take pictures of it. When you take pictures, you can put those onto a Word document and then submit the Word document with your pictures all in line. They need to be like where you can scroll down and see page 1, page 2, page 3 in order. You can also, if you have an iPhone, I don't know about the Android stuff, or any of the Google or any of that, but if you have an iPhone, in your Notes app, you can scan a PDF using your phone camera, and it'll convert it to a PDF altogether. Sometimes that can be tricky to upload from your Notes app, but if you can figure that out, Google can help you with that. But any of those ways works. If you want to type it, you're just going to export it as a PDF, or you're going to submit your Word document. And as I talked about in the intro video, make sure that you save things as you go. I always suggest saving things on your cloud. It's accessible, like you have access to it with your JSU account. It's free. Why not use it? So that way, if something happens to your computer, something happens to your device, you've still got your work. So if you can't finish all of the lecture video at once and you stop it in your notes and you come back to it later, you don't have to worry about redoing things. So now that all of that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get into things. So today we're going to be talking about the nature and creativity, as well as the purposes and functions of art. So art comes in many forms, and it's not limited to what you see in a museum. Some people say that anything can be considered art. I like to say art is anything made with a purpose in mind. So if you are just scribbling on a sheet of paper, you have no purpose, it's just for entertainment, that's not necessarily art. If you're taking a picture of your meal to share it on Instagram, you're not being purposeful with what you're doing. So I don't necessarily consider that art, but that's my perception of art. Part of what you're going to do in this class or in this module is look at different definitions of art and see what you think art is. This class focuses on visual art. So there are other art forms. We have music and dance, literature. All of those are art, but we're going to focus on visual art. So this is going to be things like painting, sculpture, photography, drawing, all of that kind of art. Another note is, in this class, we're going to use the term work of art, not masterpiece. So a masterpiece is actually a real thing. Especially in the Renaissance, but even in the Middle Ages and beyond, artists worked in a guild system. So you started as an apprentice, you studied under someone else, they taught you how to do the craft. In order to become a master in the guild, you had to submit a work of art, and that would be your masterpiece. So a true masterpiece is the work of art that somebody submits to their guild to become a master. So think about it kind of as a thesis in today's world, or a dissertation if you're getting a doctorate. Like that kind of thing is what a masterpiece is. You usually only had one. So not every work of art is a masterpiece. And a lot of times we don't actually know which work of art was considered an artist's masterpiece getting into a guild. And not all artists that we're going to talk about were in a guild. Eventually you move out of the guild system and people start learning art in schools. It's a different thing. And so we kind of move away from masterpieces. A lot of gallery owners and things will talk about masterpieces because it makes art sound more fancy. But we're not going to do that in this class because we understand the historical context of what a masterpiece is. So we're going to call them works of art. So try not to use masterpiece unless you actually know for certain that that is that artist's submitted masterpiece. So the first work of art that you should see on your screen is Pixel Deer by Kohinawa. It's mixed media, which is one of the things we're going to talk about. So mixed media is different forms or different types of media put together to make a work of art. So in this case, we have a taxidermy deer. We have crystal balls that are glass. So that's two different forms of media. So media is anything that we use to make art with. So metal is a media. Paint is a media. So in this case, it's taxidermy and crystal. If you have more than one media, it automatically becomes mixed media. There are a few exceptions to this. So you'll see for some of our paintings, it'll say like oil on panel. So the panel would be wood. The painting itself would be oil paint. But we don't consider that mixed medium. We consider that oil paint because the oil paint is the thing actually making the art. It's just has to be on a surface. So this is mixed media. It's two different things that actually make up the work of art that you see. So next we're going to talk about outsider art. So this is Lonnie Holly finally getting wings for the 41st floor. This is also mixed media. It's actually found object. So Lonnie Holly is considered an outsider artist. So outsider art is created by any untrained artist that is outside of existing traditions. So what this means is this person didn't go to school. They probably did not have a teacher that they apprenticed under in any kind of way. They're not learning, we'll talk about folk art here in just a second. They're not learning from other people in their community. This is isolated. They find things, they create things that they want to make. They may have inspiration from other works of art. They may have inspiration from things in their life, but they aren't trained under anybody else. So Lonnie Holly actually is an Alabama artist. He's Alabama native. He has worked some in Atlanta as well. So he's from the South. He did work in the Birmingham area for a long time. And he is very well known for his found object sculptures. So this sculpture in particular was created as a memorial to Lenore Gold. She was a collector of art. Lonnie was invited to view her collection in her high-rise apartment in Atlanta in the early 1990s. And he's quoted as saying, quote, "I got off the elevator at the 40th floor and saw beautiful art about things that she had understood of the days of her ancestors and their battle with the Holocaust. When I learned she had died, I thought I would give her wings to get above the 40th floor." End quote. So that's what this is. This is the work of art inspired by Lenore Gold. So our key vocabulary here is outsider art. And you can see definitions for all of this in your textbook as well. But outsider art, not working in an art tradition. We have mixed media. It's different types of media. It's found object art as well. So next is folk art. So this quilt is made by one of the G's Bend quilters. They quilt at the Birmingham Museum of Art. They're Alabama artists as well. G's Bend is a small town along the Alabama River. The occupants of this town can trace their lineage back to enslaved people from the Petway Plantation. So the quilts made by the G's Bend quilters use no sewing patterns and are designed to utilize as much scrap fabric as possible. So many of the quilts are made from old clothing or other discarded cloth goods. These quilts are considered to be among the most important African American visual and cultural contributions to the history of art within the U.S. So these are really important quilts. They're historically important, but they're still being made today. They're still G-spin quilters. You used to could go, it's before COVID, and I haven't looked to see if they still do it. I know I really need to update that, but they used to quilt at the Birmingham Museum of Art, like once a week or once a month. But they still quilt in G-spins. They sell their quilts. They show their quilts in galleries and art shows and quilt shows. So they're a bit famous. So folk artists are not formally trained. So they're not trained in an academy or a school, but they learn from working within a tradition. So someone taught them within a tradition that's already established. So quilting is a folk art. Custom cars can be a folk art. Jewelry making can be a folk art. So things like that. Sometimes pottery is folk art. Sometimes pottery is not. It just depends on how you learned how to do your pottery. Typically, folk art is passed down through ancestral lines, but it doesn't always have to be. There are a lot of examples of it not being. I mean, right now, there's a trend of people are learning how to crochet on TikTok. You're still working within a tradition. You're still learning from people before you, but it's not necessarily your ancestors that are teaching you how to crochet or how to embroider or sew or anything like that. So art can have different functions and purposes. Some art is made for utilitarian purposes, so they're meant to be used. Other art is made for self-expression. Some art is made to be decorative. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these things. So we're going to start with everyday use. So we're going to start with Josiah Wedgwood. He was an 18th and 19th century artist. He created a new form of ceramics called jasperware. It allowed for brighter and deeper colors to be used in ceramics. It had a smooth matte finish. It was really durable, and it didn't need a glaze. So that's really important. Most ceramics need a glaze, otherwise they're porous. They hold on to water. So think like a terracotta pot. If you fill it with water, it's going to start kind of absorbing that water into the edge of the pot. Whereas if it's glazed, so like a coffee mug, that's not going to soak in. So the jasperware didn't need the glaze. It wasn't going to be porous either way. We've actually lost the formula for Wedgwood's jasperware. Wedgwood, the company, still makes ceramics. They still look similar, but they don't function as well as the 19th century and late 18th century pottery does. So one of his most famous works is the Portland vase. That's the one we're looking at. He had made several versions of this during his lifetime. This one actually is meant to be decorative. I think there's two. Both of these are in the Birmingham Museum of Art. I don't know if they're on display right now, but you can always look. They had a Wedgwood exhibit that they kind of try to keep up a lot. So when they have their Wedgwood stuff out, it's really cool. So this one's decorative, but it's the most famous, so we had to talk about it since we're talking about Wedgwood. But a lot of Wedgwood stuff is utilitarian. It's meant to be used every day. It's beautiful. They're designed super well. They're meant to be gorgeous. They're meant to be works of art. But they're also meant to be used. So this is Teapot with Cover. It's a teapot. It was meant to be used as a teapot. It was used as a teapot. But it still is very intricate and delicate and designed very well. Another example is this mantelpiece. So it is decorative. It's meant to be decorative in the home, but also functions. It helps keep the fire in the fireplace. It helps seal the edges so that like air and things don't leak out. Architecture is another example of how utilitarian art or everyday objects can be designed into something beautiful, can be art. So Frank Lloyd Wright is one of the most famous American architects. This is his Falling Water. It's one of his most famous homes. It uses organic architecture to allow indoor and outdoor spaces to undulate while moving through the home. So you can be inside one moment and outside the next. You're meant to sort of move in and out through inside and outside spaces. This home was built as a vacation home for the family of Edgar J. Kaufman in the Bear Run area of Pennsylvania. So when showing the site to Wright, Kaufman stood where he thought the house should be, and he told Wright he wanted a view of the waterfall. So the view that this picture is taken is actually where Kaufman thought the house was going to be built. Wright had a different idea, and he saw the waterfall and said, that's where we'll build the house, and built the house on top of the waterfall instead. He wanted to integrate the waterfall around and through the home. It actually runs underneath and through the bottom of the home. There are times of the year where the waterfall floods. Frank Lloyd Wright thought a lot about design and how things look and function, and not always about how nature doesn't always conform to what we want. So there are periods of time where the waterfall floods, and it floods the home. A lot of Frank Lloyd Wright's homes, he also designed the furniture in. And one of his stipulations in his contract when he designed homes was that the furniture had to remain, and it had to remain where it was. So the house is flooded multiple times. Some of the furniture has been damaged and had to be repaired and put back. Because in the contract for the home, even today, the furniture has to be the certain furniture, and it has to be in certain locations. So, this is a museum. You can still visit it today. I think that they have times where they're not open because of flooding. But so if you're up in Pennsylvania area and you want to check it out, you can still visit it today. So architecture, it's functional. We're meant to use it. We're meant to live in the home. We're meant to use a building, but it still is beautiful. It still is art. It's still designed well. It has a purpose. Some art is created simply to delight or entertain the viewer. So here we have Michelangelo's David. This is an example of Renaissance art. It has an underlying religious meaning to it, the story of David, from the Christian Bible. But it's still just meant to be pretty. It's meant to look good. It's meant for viewers to look at it. It's not meant to be functional in any kind of way other than to look good. This does show idealism, which is believed to be the perfect human form. It shows ideal shape and form with an impassive look upon David's face. So the Laocoon group is another example of idealism. However, in this one, we see plenty of emotion. So the idea of idealism has changed a little bit over time. So in the beginning, during the Roman era, the idea of idealism is people were meant to be very stoic and calm. So we have this certain musculature. Let's go back to David. So this is inspired by the early Roman sculptures, but we're still going to look at it for this example. We have this contrapposto pose, which we'll talk more about as we go. But we have one leg rigid, one leg bent. Contrapposto, usually you have one straight, one bent for each leg and each arm. You're sort of leaning one way, so you create this S curve around the sculpture. So we have what is considered ideal musculature. We have a stoic face. Things are very calm and stagnant. But then, during the Hellenistic Roman and Hellenistic Greek eras, we sort of move away from that. Idealism was meant to show emotion. The ideal person had emotion. They expressed emotion. So we still have that ideal body form that's meant to have all the muscles and all of that. We still have a little bit of that contrapposto pose here. So we have bent, we have mostly straight, very bent. We see that even in straight arm, straight leg, bent arm. But we see emotion, we see fear, we see pain in this work of art. So this is the Laocoon group. I don't remember if I actually said the title. Laocoon is spelled, you can see it on your screen, the way it's spelled. So the story behind this one that it depicts, it comes from Virgil's Aeneid. Laocoon was a priest of Poseidon during the Trojan War. He was killed with both of his sons after trying to warn those of his town that the Trojan horse was a ruse. The snakes were sent as punishment by the gods, killing Laocoon and his 2 sons. So that's the story we see here. So, fun thing about this statue, we knew about it before we actually knew where it was. Pliny the Elder, who was a famous sort of historian, he wrote natural histories, so we have tons of scientific information. We know about plants that are extinct now, animals that are extinct now, because Pliny wrote about them during the era of the Romans. So we knew he wrote about this sculpture, but we didn't have the sculpture, so it was lost for a very long time, and then was found by a farmer, Felice de Freitas, in 1506 in his vineyard just outside the city of Rome. So he saw a hand sticking up out of the ground and decided to dig it up. Scholars of the day immediately knew what it was because they had read about it, because Pliny wrote about it. It was brought to the Pope, and he bought it and placed it in the Vatican, where it still resides today, so you can go view it in the Vatican. It's believed to have originally been in an underground bath of an ancient Roman villa, so that's why it was underground. So, works of art are often used to tell stories. An example of this is Jan van Eyck's Ghent altarpiece. Altarpieces were created to open as a story was told to a congregation, usually in a Catholic church. This was very common in the Middle Ages, very common during the Renaissance. So these often accompanied those Gothic cathedrals, which we'll talk more about those when we talk about some architecture later. So for a largely illiterate culture, these images helped pass down the stories of Christianity from generation to generation. So the exterior of this one shows the patrons. It has their patron saints here, and then it has the Annunciation. So the Annunciation is when the angel came to tell Mary that she was going to be the mother of the Christ child. So these are Christian images. So on the inside then, we have Christ enthroned. We have various saints. We have angels singing. We have Adam and Eve on the exterior sort of looking in. We have a procession. We have a lamb sacrificed on the altar. So that's meant to tell about Jesus being sacrificed on the cross. We have Jesus entering Jerusalem. So we have sort of stories going on here on the inside that could be told as things were being opened. A lot of the problems with the Catholic churches during their day was they spoke Latin. At large, the congregations did not, depending on where they were located. And people were illiterate. And even if they could read, they didn't have access to a Bible to read. So people only learned their religion from what they saw and then conversations with each other and with their leaders, their religious leaders. So that's kind of why these images were important at the time, is people couldn't read. They needed something to tell them what they were meant to be believing in. So art is also used to make commentary on the world in which the artist lives. So this is an example of that concept. This is Chris Jordan's Midway Message from the Gyre series. So his number, I think, is actually the number that his camera automatically gives. I'm not positive about that, but they're all just kind of a number. So the main thing you need to know for this one is Midway Message from the Gyre. If you put that in your notes, that's fine. So in this series, he poses photos of albatrosses. They've been killed by plastic waste in the ocean, so he finds their sort of rotting corpses and takes pictures of all the plastic that's there. So he's not actually adding plastic to the bodies. This is what he's found. His artistic effect is the photograph itself. He's taking the photograph of things that he finds. So one of his quotes about this series says, quote, "For me, kneeling over their carcasses is like looking into a macabre mirror. These birds reflect back an appallingly emblematic result of the collective trance of our consumerism and runaway industrial growth. Like the albatross, we first-world humans find ourselves lacking the ability to discern anymore what is nourishing from what is toxic to our lives and our spirits." End quote. So this work of art is a commentary about environmental impact. Some works of art give a political commentary. So this is Francisco Goya's The 3rd of May. There is a painting, I don't know if I included it. I did, called The 2nd of May. So the 2nd of May was the Dos de Mayos rebellion in Spain. So if you check that date, it's 1808. They rebelled against Napoleon rule. Then 3rd of May, the Napoleon's rules came in, they took back over, and they executed everyone that had anything to do with the rebellion, which really meant they didn't do any kind of investigation. They just lined all the men up and had them shot, which is terrible. So these two paintings work to sort of bring that to light, to show people. It was a commemoration of that event. It was a political statement about the atrocities of the rule of Napoleon and how he wasn't doing good. So, political statement. We see a lot of political statement art historically, so. In modern day, art for commemoration usually takes the form of a monument. So an example of this is the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. It's located in Montgomery, Alabama. So this memorial was created to commemorate the African American victims of lynching in the United States. It was built to focus on and acknowledge past racial terrorism and advocate for social justice in the United States today. So it consists of 805 6-foot hanging steel rectangles representing each of the U.S. counties where a documented lynching took place. Each beam is engraved with the known names and locations of the victims of racial terrorism. So this is in Montgomery. You can go visit it if you're interested, but this is art for commemoration. So next we're going to talk about art as a form of self-expression. Historically, art has not always been used for this purpose. However, in more modern times, there's been a shift in art production where art as self-expression has become one of the most common functions. We really see this sort of at the turn between the 18th and 19th centuries, really sort of late 18th century. Coming into, we start seeing this. We see a rise in industrialization in the 19th century that also sort of leads to ideas about psychology. We have a rise in science. So all of that sort of lends into this idea of self-expression in art. So this painting by Frida Kahlo is an example of that. It was painted in 1939. It's called The Two Fridas. So this is a self-portrait. It includes expressions of conflicting cultures within her. So on the left, she's pictured in a white European Victorian-style dress. on the left, I think I said on the right. On the left, she's wearing white European Victorian style dress. On the right, she's shown in traditional Mexican Tijuana dress. The hearts of the two Fridas are connected with a blood vessel. Some scholars believe this painting is about Kahlo's dual heritage. Her mother was Mexican and her father German, while others believe that because this painting was created after her divorce to Diego Rivera, this painting is a statement about his rejection of her European heritage. Either way, this was meant to be a statement about herself. So we do have artist self-portraiture dating back to the Middle Ages. And there is some form of self-expression there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there isn't any, but there's just a very big rise in it in the 19th century to today. Historically, art has very often included religion or ritual. We've already discussed the Ghent altarpiece as one such work. This is another example. This is Tilman Riemenschneider's Altar of the Holy Blood. So again, we have the story, we have religious figures depicted. The whole cathedral it's in is bombarded with art. The building itself is art. And it is all about religion. Another example of art for religious use is the Hagia Sophia. It's located in Istanbul, Turkey. So, this work of art this building was originally built as a Catholic church by, well, I want to say Constantine, but it wasn't. It was Emperor Justinian I. So this was around the time when they were moving the capital of the Roman Empire from Rome to what was Constantinople, is now Istanbul. Over time, this has been taken by different religions. It's been different things. Currently, it's a mosque. For a while, it was a national heritage site, and multiple religions were allowed to practice there at the same time. I think that has ended. It's been taken back over. I think it's now just a mosque again, if it's open at all. The most notable feature of this building is the dome. Well, we should talk about this one again more in the semester. But a note on that is when you invade somewhere, you don't destroy something you want. And so it was invaded over and over and over. But this building has stood for centuries. We have 360 to 537 AD. And that was the time it took to build it. And it's lasted since then. So there's the exterior of the building. Things have been added over time, so these were not part of the original structure. It has a lot of different parts around it, but the main part is this central dome. So we talked about political commentary, but we also have art for political purposes used by the rulers. So this has happened since the very beginning. Art can be a very persuasive tool. It doesn't have to show things as they actually are. So rulers have shown themselves with iconography of power and extravagance to display their power. They have mass-produced images to spread their influence and control, and people have made political cartoons to put down their rulers or call them out for doing wrong things. So 19th century France is a great example of the use of artwork for political means. So here we see Napoleon crossing the Alps. This is by Jacques Louis David. It was done in 1801. So this is depicting an event that really happened. It just didn't look like this. So Napoleon's army made its way across the Alps via the Great St. Bernard Pass in May of 1800. The journey over the Alps would have been extremely dangerous. Even in May, the mountains would have been covered in snow and ice with freezing temperatures. So this painting was meant to instill faith in the ruler and show him as powerful and brave. However, horses probably did not make their way over the mountain. They would not have been great for that terrain. Most likely Napoleon would have been in a carriage, being carried through the Alps. And if they did use horses, they also probably would have had like mules or donkeys because they were sturdier and stronger to carry the carriages over. So this was meant to show like idealism, this strength in leadership. But this is not what the event would have looked like at all. We do see sort of the men in the background walking, pushing carts, pulling carts. And then here he is on his horse. We have the opposite of that, though. We have some works of art that were created to show the power of the people over their rulers. So this is Liberty Leading the People. This is by Eugene Delacroix. It was in 1830, so these are really close. 1801, 1830, only 29 years apart. This painting was created to commemorate the July Revolution of 1830, which toppled King Charles X of France. So in this painting, the woman with the French Revolution flag is the personification of liberty. At this time, the flag was not the official flag of France, but rather the flag for the people of France during the Revolution. The figure of liberty is now viewed as a symbol of France in the French Republic and bears the name Marianne. So this painting was meant to encourage and motivate the people of France after the revolution to keep fighting and to persevere for their right to freedom and from tyrannical government. So, again, political use. So we've covered the nature, purposes, and functions of art in this module, or in this lecture. We're going to talk more about all of these works of art this semester. We're going to dive more into it. So this is kind of an overview. What is art? What is creativity? So at the end of your lecture notes, you're going to answer these questions. So how does the book definition of art compare to your personal definition of art? And where do you see creativity in your everyday life? These don't have to be very long, just a couple of sentences, just enough to answer the question and get you sort of thinking as you go into the module. If you have any questions about anything we've covered in the lecture, if you have any questions about your assignments, please email me and let me know, and I will do what I can to help you. And if you need any help before, just email me before the deadline for the due date for this class. So I will talk to you all in part 2, unless you need help before then, or in module 2, unless you need help before then.